The title of my talk today is An Open-Hearted Humanism. On this new member Sunday and this annual meeting Sunday, I want us to consider where humanism has been, where it is now, and where it needs to go in the years ahead. How do we grow the heart of humanism and the umbrella of humanism? As I was growing up, there was what I learned from the dominant culture eventually should be a dark family secret, though it was not at all seen by my family as a dark family secret. It was this: my father wasn't sure who his father was. Now, here's how that happened. My grandfather and grandmother lived on farms close to each other. Both were sharecropping families, and both of them were married and had a whole bunch of kids. Now, both of them lost their spouses within about a week of each other. My grandmother's husband, maybe my grandfather, was crushed and killed in a hay baler. Now, those were extremely dangerous machines back in horse farming days because horses could spook unexpectedly with disastrous consequences. And my grandfather, or maybe stepfather, the other one, would also eventually be a victim of that. He got his leg crushed in a hay baler a few years later. Now, my grandfather, or maybe my step-grandfather, lost his wife to some mysterious disease. They couldn't afford doctors. On the way back to the farm after his wife's funeral, my grandfather stopped off, offered condolences for the death of her husband, and proposed to my grandmother. They were married within the week, and my father was born prematurely about 7 months later. My grandparents were actually continuing a practice that the rural British poor had practiced for generations. As a matter of fact, in rural England back in those days, and all the time since the Middle Ages, prospective spouses had attended the funerals for deceased spouses of neighbors, and often proposals of marriage were made in the graveyard. Now, the rural poor were not being crass. They were being practical. They were not free to make any other choice. That's why my family never saw my father's situation as unique or embarrassing. The fact was, rural people had gender-divided tasks and that had to be performed for the sheer sake of survival. When one spouse died and there weren't any kids old enough to take up that slack, they had to get married in a hurry. Now, I tell you that story for a simple reason. Those people were driven by absolute, ironclad necessity. They did not have the option of being ashamed of what they were doing, or being rebellious, or being picky. They were not free. Now, to talk about this issue, Karl Marx invented a couple of terms. Life, Marx said, falls into two realms: the realm of necessity and the realm of freedom. Marx wrote this: the realm of freedom actually begins only where labor, which is determined by necessity and mundane consideration, ends. End quote. Now, a few weeks back, I defined freedom as the ability to change those circumstances of your life that you wish to change in order to live a more abundant life. That definition is based on the work of the Canadian philosopher Charles Taylor, who wrote this, quote, "We are free when we can remake the conditions of our own existence, when we can dominate those things that dominate us." End quote. That's his definition of freedom, to think about a moment. People locked in generational poverty are not free to change their circumstances in order to live a more abundant life. People born in the wrong body, people born in the wrong religion, the wrong nation, and on and on. And here's the thing. The essential and foremost humanist project is about achieving and expanding responsible freedom for ourselves and for everybody. That's why I put that quote from the American writer Kay Boyle in your order of service up there at the top this morning. She said, "There is only one history of any importance, and it is the history of what you once believed in and the history of what you came to believe in." Boyle is writing about human experience and human freedom. The first and foremost question every human being deserves the time and space to ask is, what is a full life, a life worth living for me? And then that question presents a couple of additional ones, I think. What is a life worth living in my own life? And perhaps most importantly, how can I help it make it possible for each and every person alive on our planet to ask that simple question, what is a life worth living? That, right there, is the heart of the humanist project as I see it. Getting people out of that realm of necessity and into, as much as possible, the realm of freedom. The essential humanist project at an institution like First Unitarian Society is to be a place where people can win and maintain their personal freedom, in a place that, if you will, plots how to achieve freedom for others now and into the future. That is our business. OJ, come on up here right now, brother. I know. I forgot to tell you that it's Midwest. You know, this is the Midwest. We're an hour ahead of you here, behind you here. Come on up here. I want to introduce Jay Hooper. Jay is going to be our summer intern. He just breezed into town. I got to give you a hug. This guy just breezed into town last night. We had a couple of beers and took you to bed. Now, Jay is a PhD candidate in interdisciplinary arts at Ohio University, where you just finished your coursework.
Yeah.
Right? That's why you're driving in yesterday.
Yeah.
Right? Has a Master of Arts in Theology from Union Theological Seminary in New York City. Right? And a BFA in Art and Design Education from Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. Jay is a candidate for clergy leadership in the ethical culture movement that is a sister humanist movement here in the United States. Jay's interests include community and civic engagement, religion and theology, and aesthetic philosophies, Black and Africana studies, performance theory, which promises some interesting things happening this summer, right? Yeah. And he joins me in being an ex-Pentecostal, right? Yeah. So, you lose the theology, but it never goes out of your body, right? No. Well, Jay, welcome. And everybody, you want to meet up and shake Jay's hand, and you'll be hearing a lot more from him. Glad you made it. All right. We humanists are in the liberation business. We're in the business of getting people out of that realm of necessity and into that, as much as possible, that realm of freedom. And so if someone asks you what humanism or First Unitarian Society is about, tell them freedom, a responsible communal freedom for everybody. And we intend to just keep expanding the notion of who and what everybody is. As I said a couple of weeks ago to the kids, we're just going to keep making a bigger umbrella. That's our intention here. Now, let's go back to that quote from Kay Boyle. There's only one history of any importance, and it's the history of what you once believed in and the history of what you came to believe in. Now, no, I don't agree with Boyle that personal history is the only history that matters. We need to know what happened before we were ever alive. However, as I've said from this platform many times over the years, the stories we tell ourselves construct our fate. The stories we tell ourselves construct our fate. Now, everybody in here has a freedom story. How you got out of what you did believe and into what you do believe. Everybody here has a freedom story. We don't share those freedom stories with each other enough. We need to communicate, right? That's together-icate, right? Communicate and tell more of those stories more often. Well, I want to think a little bit about where humanism has been. Back in the 1960s, the sociologist and theologian Peter L. Berger popularized a term. He's also a sociologist. Secularization theory. Secularization theory, he called it. Now, he looked out on the religious landscape of Europe and North America at that time, and evidence told him two things. First, that education, science, and the social safety net led to a drop in religious observance, secularization. Secondly, that introducing more and more pluralism and diversity into any given society reduces the surety among the population that one religion has all the answers. And therefore, the various religious groups begin to lighten up, if you will, when it comes to their own surety. We call that pluralism. Secularization, I'll work on that some more, and pluralism. And of course, humanists were at the forefront of those assumptions, and we saw ourselves as at the forefront of that movement. Now, to back up a little bit before that, I see that we probably have four distinct paradigms of humanism in U.S. history. The first paradigm was those 19th century freethinkers, such as the ethical culture folks that Jay's tradition is, right? And here in Minneapolis, they formed this congregation first to fight male censorship and then to study Darwin. Those were the humanists. The second paradigm and the first generation to call themselves humanists were shaped by the First World War. Dietrich came here in 1916, remember. They were mostly democratic socialists. They were reformers. They were interested in building an alternative religious community that they called religious humanism. And they believed they were building a time bomb that would eventually blow up traditional religion in the United States. They believed they were ridding the planet of the necessity of religion and providing it as a realm of freedom. The third paradigm, and the second generation calling themselves humanists, lived through the Second World War period. Many, especially Euro-Americans at that time, were benefiting from the GI Bill, VHA financing, the general explosion in suburbs and colleges and universities after the Second World War. Their living standards at that time were going through the roof. This group formed what we call nowadays secular humanism. They were children of the atomic bomb, if you will. They had atomic families and an atomized and individualist mindset. Now, we have to realize that all three of those humanist paradigms still exist, but many of the assumptions those paradigms are based on are erroneous. In the 1990s, that Professor Berger recanted his secularization theory. Yes, he said, Europe and North America now experience plurality and diversity in religious thought, but religions have far from gone away. Berger began to realize that, yes, many people, if not most, now hold secular opinions, but as it turns out, people are not consistent in their thinking or in their secularity. Modernization does not lead inevitably to secularization, and certainly it doesn't lead inevitably to humanism. Using an applied technology like a smartphone or a hybrid car does not imply that the user thinks scientifically. It's that simple. Therefore, when we say that the nuns are leaving religion in droves, we must remember several caveats. First, they're leaving organized religions in droves, but many depend upon traditional religious frameworks when considering some subjects. They are eclectic in what they pick and choose, in the religious Whitman sampler of chocolates. But for most nuns, the go-to box in extreme circumstances continues to be labeled religion, or that squishy wiggle word, spirituality. Also, religions themselves are adapting quickly to the new realities. We're watching that right across the street with the United Methodist Church over there. Denominations are splitting into liberal and conservative camps, and so-called behavior Christianity, deeds as we call it in the UU tradition, is the liberal and largely secular wing. The conservative wing is often called the belief Christians, belief Christianity. Go back to that old stuff, creeds, dogmatism, rules, and the insistence that our way is the only way. No, the United States will not secularize as many humanists and freethinkers hoped back in the 20th century. A naturalist worldview and a humanist life stance will not be the choice for lots of people. Therefore, I would argue humanism needs to do some paradigm shifting. Religious certainty and certitude have been undermined, leading to religious pluralism, the kind that we experience today. We now have a free market in religions and a diversity of religious expressions here in the United States. Still, many, if not most people, aren't worried about incompatible or contradictory beliefs. For many, if not most people, God's in his heaven and all is right with the quantum field. Religion and science are to them merely drawers that you open for different purposes, but they're all in the same happy chest of drawers. To be blunt, humanism is now only another nougat of chocolatey goodness in the candy box of religions and philosophies in America. This is a new place for humanism to be, at least conceptually, for humanists. The business guru Seth Godin offers this advice for getting your word out and positioning your brand. He says, tell the true story to the right people. Tell the true story to the right people. And I believe that's the call for our new paradigm. The story is about achieving responsible freedom for people, mentally, spiritually, economically. Our values cannot be merely another flavor of Christianity light or Hollywood, California New Age-ness. Humanists must express a positive, life-giving message within a rational worldview. A humanist, James Baldwin, wrote this, quote, perhaps the whole root of our trouble, the human trouble, is that we will sacrifice all the beauty of our lives, will imprison ourselves in totems, taboos, crosses, blood sacrifices, steeples, mosques, races, armies, flags, nations, in order to deny the fact of death, which is the only fact we have. Baldwin is outlining a great humanist program here. He's naming the negatives, that realm of necessity, totems, taboos, crosses, blood sacrifices, steeples, mosques, races, armies, flags, nations. Baldwin is talking about ways we jump feet first into that realm of necessity when we don't even have to. And we're motivated by that most dangerous of motivators, fear. When we're fearful, we cannot be free. But here is the humanist answer. There are a good many things about the human condition that are extremely unfortunate. Illness, suffering, loss. But our finitude is not one of those extremely unfortunate things, despite what our culture tells us. No, it's not fun to die. But the fact of death is not unfortunate. That's what James Baldwin is trying to point out. Or, as the poet Wallace Stevens said, death is the mother of beauty. I would also say death is the mother of freedom. The concept of eternal life erases the need to achieve freedom for yourself and for others here and now. For it is our finitude and our challenges and our losses and our potential losses that make a piquant life. Piquant, provocative, stimulating, spicy, as we say in the South. James Baldwin is defining the center of a humanist worldview, embracing our finitude. Our lives, yes, will end. But if we allow fear to be our motivator, we will sacrifice our freedom in order to deny that fact of death, as he said, which is our only fact. I am convinced that the humanist umbrella and the humanist heart can grow 3 sizes. Because the essential and foremost humanist project is about achieving responsible freedom for ourselves and for others, and we are here in the freedom and liberation business. That's what we do. The older humanist paradigms were escape, 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 get out of, individuality, individuality, individuality. The new paradigm must be about communal liberation, all of us together. Look at that K. Boyle quote one more time. There is only one history of any importance, and it is the history of what you once believed in and the history of what you came to believe in. Please share, please think about your freedom story. Have you moved beyond traditional Western Christianity? Have you moved beyond traditional Western theism? Have you moved beyond traditional Western dualities and either-ors and binaries? Have you moved beyond even thinking you're right all the time? Have you stopped fearing death? I find it liberating to realize that the religions and philosophies and economies and nations and art and on are all human. Human thinking and human art. I find it liberating to realize that no one on the planet has ever had a better idea of what's going on than we do today. No one has ever had a better or worse handle on meaning, purpose, and truth if they were free. It's all human. Ideas, emotions, every religion, every philosophy, all have a history, and most include a political and military history that are not pretty. All were once new ideas. All were once fads. And many are known still only due to the oppression and violence practiced in their names. Liberation from these age-old tropes is possible. Personal liberation and communal liberation, because I believe those must go hand in hand. Yes, there are principalities and powers, as the Apostle Paul phrased it, arrayed against us in our liberation. But those are not supernatural. They're all human. But in community, there is that thing in the jar, hope. With humanism, it can even be a true hope and true freedom rather than an illusion. That's what humanism is here for. That's what we're here for. And let's share it.